Hello and welcome to number 230-ish of Mark Talks About His Record Collection. Today is Wednesday, 7th September 2022. Today, as per the title of the Notcast, I'm going to be talking about a relatively obscure period of the life of British pop and dance duo Underworld. I'm going to be talking about their 2005 to 2006 period, which will include the albums Live in Tokyo, Breaking and Entering, the River Run project, and a bunch of 12-inch singles, most of which are largely forgotten in the history of the band, which is strange, I guess. But if you think, oh, well, Underworld didn't do an album between 2002 and 2007, au contraire, mon frère, not quite true. They did quite a lot of stuff. It just wasn't in a very obvious, very public CD album format. And obviously, whilst today is the 7th of September 2022, it doesn't really matter what day I film these. It doesn't matter how often I do them. I guess the thing that matters more than anything for me is that they're there for long periods of time to come, so anyone that's interested can watch them without automatically thinking, oh, this is going to be very, very topical, because one of the worst things about being topical is that it becomes dated very, very quickly. And as you've noticed from the Kraftwerk t-shirt, Kraftwerk were very futuristic, but when the future caught up with them, that was when they stopped being innovative and they stopped making great records and stopped making records full stop, actually, come to think of it. So there we are. Talking about the Underworld period, which is called the River Run project, starting in 2005. I'm going to go up to the release of probably 2007's Oblivion with Bell's album today. So that's only about 18 months in the band's lifespan, but it was very, very busy. And at the same point, on the surface, didn't look that busy at all to the outside observer. We were still, the whole world was in a transitional stage when it came to things like media and entertainment, because broadband had come on. The internet was still a thing. People, MySpace was popular. Facebook had barely started to exist. Twitter hadn't started, I don't think, or it started during this period. The transition from VHS to DVD was complete. Blu-ray and the HD DVD formats were fighting it out for the death. There was confusion around how do people consume and access films and music. This period happened when LPs moved over to tapes, moved over to CDs, when the 7-inch single started to move into the 12-inch single, into the CD single. There's a period of time where there's like a format impermanency, and people don't quite know, well, how am I going to consume my music? Am I going to download it all off Napster or LimeWire or SoulSeek? Am I going to listen to it on YouTube? Bearing in mind, I think YouTube didn't start until 2007. Things like Spotify didn't exist. So it was difficult to know how people were going to listen to music. There was no consensus around what the future of music consumption, film consumption looked like. The move went obviously from Blu-ray through to streaming, for example, from CDs and MP3s through to streaming. Vinyl was at probably the lowest period of its consumption in its history. The vinyl revival started probably around about 2008, 2009, before really kicking off about 2011. And so we had a mixture of formats, a mixture of ways in which this music was delivered. During this period, Underworld released 3 EPs, a live album, and a soundtrack album. And they were released in a combination of formats. They also issued, I think, 4 or 5 singles, which were vinyl only. So if you wanted to get everything by the band, you had to think about having 3 different formats at least in which to get everything. So there was, if you were just like, well, I'll only buy CDs, for example, you didn't experience the River Run projects at all, or the 3 EPs that were released during that. You could get the live album, that was on CD, and the soundtrack album was on CD, but the 4 or 5 singles weren't. They were only on vinyl. So it was really difficult to try and go, well, if I'm a fan, what do I do? How do I consume this stuff? And I think after the 100 Days Off album, And the greatest hits selection, or well, the 1992-2002 compilation. There was a sense of, well, where do we go here? And you know, if you're in a band, you're an artist. You don't necessarily stop making music, do you? You don't go, right, well, I'm not going to write any more songs, not unless you're Guns N' Roses or Kraftwerk. You go to the point where you write new material, but then there's a hesitation or an uncertainty around, well, what do I do with these? Do we sell these out as individual tracks for soundtrack albums? Do we put them on compilations? Do we release a record? Do we have a record? And there's something very, very different from having, 100 minutes or 2 hours of music and having an album. Because an album is a cohesive artistic statement. It's a whole that's meant to be listened to as a chunk, as an entity. It's not just a selection of 11 songs that are, ranked in order of greatness, because then you end up with just a compilation of unreleased material. And as I said before, the sequencing and creation of an album, super important to get it right. And what you leave off is just as important as what you put on. And so therefore Underworld kind of sidestepped that by creating a download-only series of EPs. They aren't available anymore officially, so if you want to hear these, you have to kind of stream them on YouTube or something. You can't go to underworldlive.com and download them. They're not available. And this is also, of course, one of the other issues that we have with format impermanency, is when formats change, you will find that certain releases and certain bits of music and certain experiences are trapped on obsolete formats. So, for example, The Cure's Show and The Cure in Orange are still only available on VHS, video CD, and Laserdisc, the last of which was probably manufactured in about 1996. They're not on DVD. So, in terms of a physical, official release, those don't exist. The River Run series by Underworld, which is 3 EPs that were released between November 2005 and June 2006, are not officially available to purchase, even though they are only 15, 16 years old. They have fallen into that format black hole of the transition from one type of consumption to another. I don't know if they're on Spotify. I haven't looked. I probably should have done. But since this is not an academic thesis, let's not ask for citations. There was, however, a physical release of these 3 EPs, which was very, very limited, and here it is. So this is a promotional CDR of the 3 EPs, which are the main body of what I'm going to be talking about today, the River Run series. And the River Run series was 3 EPs released as 3 30-minute MP3 files between November 2005, 9th of November 2005 and 5th of June 2006. And the 3 formats were Lovely Broken Thing, Pizza for Eggs, and I'm a Big Sister, and I'm a Girl, and I'm a Princess, and This Is My Horse. Each one of these was about half an hour long, and it contained a combination of 4 or 5 separate musical pieces that were linked to create one thematic whole. So 3 half-an-hour EP stroke mini albums that were sequenced as one and were meant to be listened to as one musical experience. The first one of which, Lovely Broken Thing, was released on the 9th of November 2005, and again available as a 192k MP3 from the band's website. This CDR here, because they are 3 half-an-hour length tracks, this CDR is actually a burnt CDR of MP3s at 192k. It's not a music CD, it is a data CD, and this is the only physical release that those 3 EPs have had in full. It's difficult to get and difficult to find, I'm afraid to say, and obviously it's 192k, which is pretty low bit rate, to be honest, these days. You couldn't ever get it as a full kind of high bitrate release. At least I don't think you could. But the River Run series is here. The first one, Lovely Broken Thing, was on the 9th of November 2005, and that had a number of tracks that were in it. The ones of which I forget, but there's about 4 or 5 songs on there which kind of run together. There was a 12-inch that was released from this, although it wasn't the first 12-inch to be released, because the release dates for the 12 inches are a little nebulous and a little strange, so I don't quite know which one is which. Hang on, I'll have to go and check actually. So as I've said, the first release is Lovely Broken Thing, which was released on the 9th of November 2005. It was 28 minutes and 36 seconds long, and you can probably tell by the change in lighting that I've got my laptop below me and I'm reading off a screen here. And it came bundled as an MP3 file with 177 images that were next to it. And because of, as I said, format impermanence at the time, I don't think this is officially available anymore. I don't think you can buy it. But it was 7 tracks that were all mixed together to create one listening experience. And the tracks were Jalta Tokyo, Billy the Goat, Peggy Sust, Dub Shepherd, Lenny Penny, Monkey Wink, and Witness, all names which you probably don't actually know. And there was a limited set of 12-inch releases as well. So, for example, Peggy Sust got a 12-inch. Here it is, which was released outside of that period. Jalta Tokyo was released as a 12-inch as well. I've got a copy somewhere, I don't remember where now, of Jalta Tokyo. And also, I think Lenny Penny appeared on the soundtrack album to a film called Sunshine. So here is the Jalta Tokyo 12-inch, which was downstairs, and here is the Peggy Sust 12-inch as well. And these were released outside of the EP cycle, so they were released at different times, and the formats and the numbers are strange. So the first 12-inch that was released from the period was Jalta Tokyo. Here it is, the only physical, official, buyable version of the track, and it was effectively a 12-inch with some remixes. So this has the Paul Woolford vocal and the Paul Woolford Sunrise dub on there, as well as the original Underworld River Run version of it. Well, it's a pretty bog standard 12-inch single. But as I said, people didn't know whether 12-inches were a durable format. Were they going to survive? So this wasn't released on CD. This wasn't released as a download. This was only released as a 12-inch and is available to stream now. But the strange thing is again, this is a release that, unless you were probably paying attention at the time, and I must admit I wasn't, it would have passed you by, and you were kind of going, oh, they've done a 12-inch remixes of a track I've never heard, of an EP that I haven't bought, that I can't listen to. So the idea of self-publishing a release, sticking it out for a download, it was an experiment, and obviously it depended upon, well, how many copies have we sold? Have we made enough money? Have we, is this the format for the albums that we're going to have in future? Is it going to be EPs that are download only, or is it going to be 12-inch singles of remixes? Is the album dead? And obviously CD sales had plummeted, and physical sales had plummeted to the point where like a physical release of anything is just another merchandising option at this point. And sometimes it's more profitable to do 12 inches, and the music is just another revenue stream that goes along with that. There's a lot of confusion, in short, amongst the whole of the music industry about how do you sell music, how do you format music, how do you distribute it, how can you make it viable economically to have those releases. And nobody had the answers. They were experimenting and trying things as they were going along, to the point where we have 100 minutes of Underworld music under the River Run series, which officially has only been released on a weird CDR of MP3s if you really, really want the physical versions of the tracks. It's a bizarre kind of state, but the whole world was in flux and change at the time. And of course, what we do know now is nothing is permanent. So that was the first one of Lovely Broken Thing, which, as I've said, would contain those 7 tracks, 3 of which I think will reappear later on. And then there's Jalta Tokyo 12-inch. Now, that came out on the 9th of November 2005. And around about the same time, a couple of other things happened. The first one is that Underworld were touring. They played Tokyo on the 25th of November 2005, and they sold CDs of that show, the second Underworld official live album, Underworld Live in Tokyo, which they sold through their website. They sold, I think, vouchers for them, which were later posted to you at the show, and they later sold some overstocks on eBay. This is, or was, the last missing link in my Underworld collection. It took me 10 years to find a copy that was less than £100, and I eventually got it, obviously, by the fact that it's here. But this is a fabulous 3-hour Underworld live set recorded in Tokyo. It's the whole show over 3 CDs, but as you can tell, they hadn't finalised what they were going to play until they got to the show itself. So the track listing isn't on the disc. These are silver factory press CDs. And then you've got a second CD here, and then a third CD that sits on a jewel case that sits in a tray underneath. It's an unusual and very minimally packaged kind of release, but this is an absolutely essential Underworld live album. It features the only physical CD distributions of a number of songs. It features a number of previously unreleased material which was only performed live, and some of the Darren Price interstitial tracks. So probably should explain. Although the band was a duo of Rick Smith and Carl Hyde, they had a third person on stage with them, Darren Price, who was a DJ, who was effectively a technician and was helping the band with the technical elements of their show, but had also written a number of songs which were quite minimal, very different in style to Underworld, and those songs existed as kind of like bridging pieces between existing Underworld songs. So you would have songs like "Can You Feel This Bass," "Shake That Higher," those type of things. And they're not. They don't sound like Underworld, but they're made on the same equipment. They're clearly part of the show, but they're a very different artistic flavour to the rest of the Underworld material, and that might be why I think Darren is probably not part of the official Underworld configuration these days, because his writing style doesn't gel with Rick and Carl. But obviously, personally and as a kind of like a technical element, it completely works. But Underworld Live in Tokyo is a pretty obscure live album released on CD, ripe for a reissue, as in fact is this whole period. There was a lot of material that you could get through here, probably 6 or 7 CDs worth of material, which just kind of slipped underneath the radar because of the difficulties and the lack of decisions, or the lack of certainty that there was about, well, what format is going to survive? What are we going to use? And if you're not careful, you end up being a band that makes decisions to release singles on mini disc or albums on DAT that sell 50 copies, and the other 50 copies get thrown in the bin. Of course, if you're the Smiths, I think they did a DAT of Rank, which I think they sold about 47 copies, and the other 53 they chucked in the bin, and they now sell for hundreds of pounds. But everyone was just going, what's DAT? Mini disc or something. It was the same kind of thing. There were too many formats, too many ways of delivering music, and something inevitably was going to fall through the cracks. So Underworld Live in Tokyo, it is on YouTube. I will post a link to it down there. It is a fabulous live recording, very, very, very worth listening to, but very, very prolific. That was the 25th of November, so we already had an EP, we'd had a single, we had a triple live CD, all in the same month, so a big month for Underworld fans, until, of course, you get to December, and the 6th of December, 7th of December 2005, sees the release of the second EP, which is called Pizza for Eggs, and again, it's about a half-hour album, or mini album. Pizza for Eggs is actually 25 minutes 7 seconds. It's got 444 photographs that are included in it, and it's got a number of tracks. So it's got Food Already, Back in the Fears, Vanilla Monkey, Flats, Ancient Fat Farm Coat, and Playpig. And Vanilla Monkey and Playpig got single releases as well. So here are the 12 inches of them. Again, I don't know when these actually came out. So there's a Vanilla Monkey here. And it has a Martinez remix on it, and it has the Winomi and Robag Munsterel with Melody remix, and the Underworld River Run version on the 12-inch there of Vanilla Monkey. And also Playpig got 2 12-inches, so it got the Pig and Dan remixes alongside the Buick and River Run versions. I'll get to these 12 inches again in a little bit more detail shortly. And then there was the third EP which came, but with that release on the 7th of December 2005 of Pizza for Eggs, we also had the first of the Lemon World webcasts. So if you're a bootleg trader, or if you're deep into following everything that Underworld have ever done, the band started broadcasting live sessions from their studio, which is a pig shed in a field in Romford, which you're not legally meant to know about where it is, because it's probably chock full of expensive equipment and very tightly secured. But they would play live sets in their studio. And as I mentioned before, when they played live sets, what they often would do is they'd work through iterations of arrangements. They'd work through unreleased songs. They'd work through all of these different types of things to come forward. And obviously, like a jam band, the more that you play something, the more you find a durable arrangement that works. When we think about the earlier release of Second Toughest in the Infants, one CD of which is about 8 or 9 different iterations of Born Slippy as the song is formed from its component elements, and the band get the menu absolutely correct and the ingredients absolutely correct and the order in which everything works. These live sessions were not like standard live gigs. You wouldn't get Res and Cowgirl and Born Slippy and all that stuff. You might get versions of them, but you wouldn't get the actual hit version. You'd get, here's an alternative interpretation of the song where the elements work in a different way. It's very similar in many ways and reminds me of the Grateful Dead and a number of other kind of jam bands, where really a set list was more of a kind of a crib sheet, and songs had no specific start or end points. They kind of rose and fall like waves. They'd appear and then they'd disappear, and a song might only exist for 10 minutes. And there's a couple of Underworld songs where I've seen the band improvise those songs live on stage. It's the only time the band have played those particular songs, and were there not a recording of them, then you wouldn't have them. So, for example, I would say that the show that they played or broadcast from their studio on the 15th of December 2005 had approximately 7 or 8 previously unreleased songs which the band played, and there were some jams and there were some ambient versions. There were relatively straight interpretations of things like Gel to Tokyo, and there was a Telematic, and there was like a version of Born Slippy. They did a version of Skyscraper, I Love You, and Born Slippy, where the two songs kind of jumped inside each other, and it's absolutely fascinating to hear early versions of songs before they've been complete, or before the bands have decided on definitive arrangements. So the start and end points are different, and you kind of hear the band going, we're going to try this version, we're going to try that approach, and then they test it and they play it and they listen to it and they kind of go, right, it's not quite there, we need to rearrange the ingredients in a slightly different order. But absolutely fascinating. And these were webcast through the band's website. They were webcast through syndicated radio as well. So they did another one which was on I think the 13th of May 2006, which was a much longer, more expansive version, and where you could tell that the arrangements were different. And the webcast that they did on the 13th of May coincided, near enough as damn it as makes no difference, with the release of the third and final EP from this period, I'm a Big Sister, and I'm a Girl, and I'm a Princess, and This Is My Horse, which is a fabulous name for any release, but it does make MP3 tagging an absolute bloody nightmare. And I'm a Big Sister. I was released on the 5th of June 2006. It runs for 30 minutes. It had 53 photographs that were included in it, and it has 5 tracks on, which are Peachtree, Mode Path, Shoulder, Wedge, and 1100 Hertz. And Peachtree appears in a remixed form on the B-side to the 2007 single Crocodile, which was the first single that was released from the album Oblivion with Bells, but I will get to that when we get to Oblivion with Bells by Underworld. And at the same point, the band did a webcast from their studio in May 2006, and at this point they premiered the track Always Loved to Film in a very primitive instrumental version, a track called Bamboo, and they also played Lenny Penny, Ring Road, Holding Them Off, Jam in May, Architecture for the Blind, which is also known as Playpig, and versions of Pearl's Girl, Res, Cowgirl, Skyscraper, I Love You, Mo Move, and that broadcast features the first studio performance of a still unreleased Underworld track called Bamboo, which put technically is a banger, and I absolutely love it, but I don't think they've ever found an arrangement that they're totally 100% happy with, although they have played Bamboo a lot. And again, I'll post a link to it in the comments so that you can hear it and you can make a decision for yourself. So those are the 3 EPs that were released around about that time, a total of around about 90 to 100 minutes in total on there. And slightly too long to fit on a single CD, so the band didn't release it physically. It's not released on vinyl, it's not released on CD, apart from the CDR of the River Run project. And there was also a fourth release which came out at the same time, which is called the Mysterions mix, which is a mix by Steve Hall and Darren Price, which combines remixes and alternate versions of some of the tracks combined together to create a half-hour soundscape. And that is effectively, side 4 of the double album. But it's a variation of what you've already heard in there. So if you haven't got the Mysterions mix, you're not losing very much, to be honest. But the Mysterions mix features versions of Peachtree, Vanilla Monkey, Lenny Penny, Billy Goat, Back in the Fears, the Playpig remix by Pig and Dan, and Food Are Ready as well. And that is 2006. Well, that's actually less than a year, because there's 3 EPs, a triple live album, 2 radio broadcasts from the band's studio, which effectively are kind of like very discreet, kind of like low profile live albums. And then you get the next thing, which is a soundtrack album for a film called Breaking and Entering, which was directed by the now, I think, sadly departed Anthony Minghella. And this is the soundtrack album, the band's first soundtrack album. This got a CD only release, so again, vinyl fiends, not on vinyl, not in any other format. CD was pretty much the only physical version that existed at this point. This is about 70 minutes of largely ambient Underworld material. So if you listen to it and go, no hits on there, that's not really the point. This is most definitely the soundtrack to a film. It's a kind of like a tense film about life in urban London in the mid 2000s. It's not fun. Some of Anthony Minghella's films aren't fun. They're maybe not quite Ken Loach level of being smacked in the face with a hammer of misery, but they're still not fun things to watch. But the soundtrack album sets a very specific kind of sound and vibe of a slightly threatening, slightly depressing, slightly brutalist environment, and that's reflected in the music. And it's a collaborative album between Underworld and Gabriel Yared. It was recorded, actually, it was the first Underworld thing that I know of to be recorded at the world famous Abbey Road Studios, where some band called the Beatles made a lot of records. You may have heard of them at some point. But again, if you're thinking, oh, I haven't heard any new Underworld stuff for a while, go for the River Run series, go for the Breaking and Entering soundtrack. But do know, this is a soundtrack album. This isn't a standard Underworld record. It's not, it's not, you listen to it and you go, it's music for doing something else to. It's not music to be listened to with your whole focus. Unless your whole focus is you want to feel slightly uneasy about the state of the world, at which point Breaking and Entering is bang up your street. There was also, as I said, there were some 12-inch singles that were released around about this period. The dates of when these 12-inch singles were released is a lot more difficult to track down. But we'll go through them in catalogue order as opposed to recording order. And I think the first one of these was the Jail to Tokyo single, which is here, Underworld number 8. And again, this has got 2 remixes plus the River Run version of it. The second single to be released from this period was the Vanilla Monkey remixes. Here is a slightly vandalised 12-inch of Vanilla Monkey, which features the Martinez remixes and the Underworld version. I also have a 12-inch test pressing of Vanilla Monkey with handwritten labels. Here it is. This is the version that was signed and approved for production. The third single that was released was Playpig, and this is again a white label test pressing of Playpig, which has the Buick Project remixes on, and on side 2 it also has the original Underworld mix of Playpig on there. Playpig was clearly quite popular. It got a second 12-inch. Here's the second 12-inch, which has got the Pig and Dan remixes. Some of these are really good, by the way, the Pig and Dan remixes. There's also a white label 12-inch of the Pig and Dan remixes test pressing there, that's the one that's approved. Again, with test pressings, they probably only did about 50 copies of those. So when I saw those come up and they were affordable, I was like, okay, I'm going for those. And then we also have the last of the releases here. This one is called Underworld 12, and this is the Peggy Sust 12-inch, which features the Pete Heller remixes and the River Run version, and again the white label 12-inch of the remixes there that the band checks and approves and sent to production. So that is the period that runs through the River Run project. Very, very prolific for the band. You have 3 EPs, you have 4 singles, all with a chock full of remixes. You have the soundtrack album to Breaking and Entering. You have the Live in Tokyo triple CD, and then finally the band did the soundtrack to the Danny Boyle film Sunshine, which featured Jalta Tokyo on there as well, which is quite strange actually, listening to it and going, that really doesn't fit in with the film. Officially, the soundtrack to Sunshine hasn't been released, but it has been made available for a download, and there are copies of it circulating around. Now, the last thing that the band did during this period is they played a live show at the Cocoon Club, which is, I can't remember where that is now. I really should know. Let me check where it is. Frankfurt on the 12th of October 2006, with Sven Vath, who I think's died now, but did, I think it was at Higher States of Consciousness, which was a big rave hit in the early 90s. And the band played 2 sets, totaling over 3 hours, about 30 songs at that period. And they broadcast the show through their website and on local radio as well, and copies of that circulate. But again, it was a heavily improvised show that didn't rely on hits in much the same way as some of the other webcasts did. I will post a link to it down there so you can hear it. But the band were very kind of prolific there. So you think about it, they did 3 web-only live albums or studio sessions, almost like listening to the band jam through their repertoire, a live triple CD, a soundtrack album, 3 EPs and 4 singles. And this period is almost completely glossed over if you're an Underworld fan, because most people don't know this stuff happened. I mean, certainly for me, 2005, 2006, my life was pretty tough at that point. You know, that I was, in retrospect, looking back at it, I was quite depressed, and the things that you normally have in your life that bring you joy and pleasure. So, for example, you know, chocolate, sex, music, whatever it is, those things weren't working for me the way that they'd worked for me previously. The pleasure receptors had switched off or changed. And so, normally I know, well, if I put that in, then this pleasure comes out. That connection had been broken for me in my life. And so I wasn't that closely connected to Underworld at this period of time. They weren't playing live shows in the UK. They were playing Europe and Japan and places like that. And I know the UK was in Europe at that point, but they weren't playing the UK mainland. So I was in the position of listening to the music and feeling almost detached, like I was watching it through a window, or watching it on a television with the volume turned down in a hardware store, as opposed to anything else. So I was not experiencing the joy which I was normally getting from Underworld in the way in which I was normally experiencing it. And that, combined with the fact that these weren't CD releases, these were download only releases, these were really obscure to get. I lost touch with the band for a little period of time. I came back to them probably about early 2008, which of course is the period covered by the album Oblivion with Bells, which will be the next of the Underworld ones that I talk about. So this episode, short, sweet, lots to go through. I think at this point the band were quite, or at least felt quite liberated from the constraints of having to follow a traditional release schedule, of having to pull together an album, of having to think about, well, we sequence the whole thing as an album, and we then think about which tracks go where and which ones become singles and which ones become hits. And then we have to tour, and then we have to do dozens of interviews. It became a far more liberated release program. Right, we've got half an hour of music. That's good enough. We'll put that out, and we'll put it out as a download EP. We don't have to worry about manufacturing. We don't have to worry about formatting restrictions. We don't have to think about when it's going to fit into a cycle or to tie it in with a tour. We'll just stick it out, and then we've got some remixes, and we'll put those out when they're ready. And yeah, free from the constraints of perhaps a more standard and more structured, organised business approach. Must have been quite liberating, but at the same point quite scary to go into that environment and go, right, so we've spent a year writing these songs, we're going to make them available for download, and we don't know if anyone's going to buy them, and we're not going to play any shows, or we can't play any shows. We're not going to do any remixes. We're just going to stick the stuff out and hope that it lands. It was a really, really weird time to be a fan of music. because obviously social media was in its infancy. We had format impermanency, we had the migration from CD to download to MP3 to file sharing to streaming. We had the move from DVD and we had the move from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray to streaming to Netflix, etc. We had all of that going on, and there was a huge amount of uncertainty around what the future was going to look like and how music fit into it. These days, of course, we have a far better idea about that. But as we all know, the future is an undiscovered country, and you can never go there, because by the time that you are in the future is now. Right, so that's enough of me, enough of my yakking, as the guy from Spinal Tap said. Let's boogie. I'm going to wrap up here. Thanks for your time. If you watched the whole thing, thanks for your patience. I will put links down below to the live shows that you can stream, you can listen to the remixes, and so on and so forth. Please do subscribe. The more subscribers I get, I think if I get 1,000 subscribers, I might actually be able to make about 8p out of all of these, as opposed to make 0p out of them. And we all know I only do it for the money, because it's filthy lucre and it's your money I'm after, baby. That's obviously a complete fib, but do subscribe, and if you like my stuff, let me know, and of course the links will be handy, so have a look below this particular video where I'll post links to the live sets and the remixes and all that type of stuff. Stay beautiful, take care of yourselves and each other, and adios amigos. See you later. Bye.